Hello everyone, it's Rita van Haren here presenting from Canberra. Firstly, thank you to my ETAC colleagues for inviting me to present at your virtual conference. My presentation today, Formative Assessment and Peer Collaboration, builds on Bill Cope's keynote address on feedback through digital media. In fact, I will use Bill's framework in my session as I show examples of feedback from schools that I'm working with or have worked with in the past. All of the examples are in Scholar, but the feedback principles are relevant for all digital platforms. So I'm going to look at digital classroom discourse as feedback and how that feedback can develop deep understanding and clarify thinking. Then I will look at crowdsourcing feedback in rubric-based assessments to demonstrate the power of personalised feedback from peers. Then I'll move to big data, learning analytics and artificial intelligence's feedback with examples that show how adaptive feedback can support students to self-regulate their learning. Finally, I'll draw that all together to show how feedback can support mastery learning. So to get started, let's go into Scholar, which is the platform where I'm going to show the examples. To give you a bit of context, I think I'll just go through the apps in Scholar that you can see across the top of the page here. Community is the discussion board, the discussion forum. A community is typically a class of students. Creator is the space where students do more substantial pieces of work that go through peer review. Publisher is the teacher space where teachers set up projects and assign reviewers and publish students' work. The analytics are the learning analytics that give feedback to students on how they're participating in the community forum as well as in their peer-reviewed projects. Event is a space that is used by Common Ground research networks for people to register for their conferences that they hold all over the world, whereas the bookstore is the place where works by researchers, papers, as well as learning modules developed by teachers are published and where they can be accessed. Even without a Scholar account, you can log into the bookstore and have a look at some of the learning modules that are there. When I log into Scholar, I arrive here. Here's my landing page, which is my personal profile. Here is everything that is going on in my world in Scholar. On this side, on the left side, you can see the communities that I am a member of, my peers, and also all of my students. On the right-hand side, over here is my recent activity, plus publications and shares that I may have with students that I can post into the activity stream. The activity stream is made up of updates that I create or other students create. And here you can see what's going on in terms of some high school students in year 8, 9 and 10. We started work with them a couple of weeks ago when term 2 started, and it is totally asynchronous learning. So the students are working in Scholar, developing their understanding of the English concept of authority. So I'm going to take you into a community where the students are learning about authority. This was their very first update. It's a Year 9 English class. And what I'm focusing on here is that first part of my presentation, digital classroom discussion as feedback. Okay, so this class, we have a very clear learning intention, which is very important in asynchronous environments. So they're going to give authority to their own opinions by providing reasons, and they have some success criteria about what they have to do. There are 6 issues. They can choose 1 to 3 and provide reasons for which one they think has more authority on a specific issue. A doctor or a teacher on the symptoms of coronavirus, a TV show critic or a sports star on the best new TV show, a teacher or a classmate on due dates for an assignment, and so forth. These are deliberately chosen to link to students' life worlds. These are things that they might have an opinion about, and by exploring it in this way, they're starting to develop an understanding of authority. So we go down and you can see there's a comment box. We scaffold students' understanding of how to comment and comment on others with possible comment starters. And then they go below, and here is the comment box where they can add a comment. There are about 40 students in this class, and you can see we were quite astounded at how much some of them were writing. So this student wrote on 4 and gave reasons for why she thought who would have more authority, the doctor or the teacher, the TV show critic or the sports star. And if I scroll down, you can see there is a lot of writing here. Okay, about 40 students. Okay, and there are comments with them commenting on each other. Okay, and I'm going to scroll down to one where there were some nice comments. Keep going. Goes on forever. I can keep going. Okay. I might stop here at Corrie. So Corrie has chosen 3. Remember, she only had to choose 1, so she pushed herself 1 to 3. And she talks about a doctor having more authority than a teacher when it comes to the coronavirus, and then gives reasons for why she thinks that. And she does that for 3 of the statements. Now, it's interesting because that is her response to the teacher's update. This is what is typical in a classroom environment. A teacher asks a question, here is the answer. But now, with students commenting on each other, something else is happening as they contribute to the collaborative intelligence of the group. So Pablo says, I agree with you on the first 2, definitely, but on that last one, what if the people going on holiday had never been there before? So Pablo is asking Corrie a question, and it's enabling her to clarify her thinking and to respond and to deepen her understanding of what makes a person more authoritative on an issue. Lucinda says, I agree with most of what you are saying in your comment, but with number 3, do you think someone has more authority over age than quantity? What I mean by this is, who would you listen to? Someone older saying one thing or a large group of younger people saying another thing? Again, challenging Corrie to think more deeply, but thinking more deeply herself. So in this way, it's metacognitive. They're thinking already about their responses and clarifying and deepening their understanding. Lani says, thanks for your interesting opinion regarding holiday destinations. Although I disagree with your response, so respectful. I think that people who review lots of different holiday destinations would have a better understanding and better advice than someone limited to a few personal holidays. So here is this feedback in a discussion forum that is developing understanding. In this discussion forum, students can also be active knowledge makers. They contribute knowledge to the learning community. So here we have a student, after giving her opinion, after analysing some images that the teacher posted, now has to find images herself on an issue that she is interested in. She chose body images, insecurities promoted by social media. She's got 2 images here. What's really interesting here is she explores authority in terms of the number of followers. Does this person with 14.1 million followers have more authority than somebody who has 89 followers? She writes a little explanation about that. And then she has other students commenting on what she has written. So Nikita says, I believe that the first woman, Taylor, has more authority and people will tend to have more respect for her simply because she has more followers and a verification symbol. Whereas Marcos asks the question, I agree with your argument and how one's popularity and or previous experiences can affect the way someone sees authority and how this changes people's views on this issue. But he asks the question, who do you think holds the most authority out of the two? So in this way, challenging with a question in a very respectful way, he is getting the student to deepen her understanding of who holds most authority. Again, it's metacognitive because they're not just responding to the teacher's question, but they're thinking about it further and justifying their opinions. So a discussion forum can be a really powerful way of developing understanding through feedback. If we link that back to Bill's points, in this environment, everyone responds and everyone can initiate. There are no barriers to participation and everything is written and documented. In Bill's presentation, he showed a community in Wisconsin of students, grade 8 students, studying the comedy of errors. And so I'm going to show their community too. Those two communities that I just showed, they've been in Scholar for 2 weeks and they're starting to develop their understanding of going beyond just responding to the teacher, but responding to each other. In this community, these students were experienced users of Scholar, and it's really interesting to see just how much they wrote. So the students are going to be writing an essay about theme and language in the Comedy of Errors. And so the teacher has set up an activity where they're exploring themes and ordering them as they occur in the play and then ordering them in terms of important, adding any other themes they can think of, and then taking a photo of it with their iPhones and posting that to the community discussion forum. In this update posted by a student called Elle, she gives an explanation of what theme stood out to her and also provides a quote, as they are asked to do, and how that quote illustrates the theme. This is all scaffolding their understanding for their argumentative essay. However, it's not just them doing the thinking in response to the teacher's prompt. There is also this collaborative intelligence that is being developed as students interact. We'll go down to the first, look how many comments Elle got on her post. And firstly, November comments. She says, I really like how you analyse the fact that one theme, in this case identity, led to another. And she aligns that with her own thinking and what she did in her own work and gives positive feedback to Elle. Becca comes in and does a similar thing. I like how you use quotes and how one theme leads to another. Again, she aligns it with the work that she did. So it reinforces her own thinking. Michael says, I did like the theme you chose, but then he asks a question. So this question not only shows that he is thinking, but he is now asking Elle to clarify her thinking. And he asks two questions there. Is there more to it than just identity? Is there a specific stand that the author takes? And then goes on to elaborate on that. Again, linking it to his own work. Sydney really engages with Elle's post and he says some of your themes were really out of the box in a good way. The two that I really find interesting that I never thought of were misunderstanding and disagreement, but then goes on to ask her a question. I was wondering, and what do you think of? So Again, he's clarifying his thinking, but he's asking Elle to do the same. And Elle comes in now, so it's a dialogue, and she responds to Sydney and says, I think that the quote I chose to analyse also could relate to appearance versus reality, and so on. But she comes back with a question. How do you think appearance versus reality and identity differ from each other across the play? Do you think they both lead to different central ideas alike? How identity leads to misunderstanding? So there's really high order thinking going on in this discussion where the teacher is not to be seen. Everything is documented, it's student initiated, and they are developing understanding through this discussion. And of course, there is more, and Elle has more conversation with Sydney as she progresses. All of this discussion is a scaffold into them writing their essays in Creator. And that's where I'm going to go now, into Creator. Here we are. And now I'm going to look at crowdsourcing as a feedback in rubric-based assessment. The student I'm looking at is the focus student in our research project. Her name was Ellie. She was a very motivated student, and once we had chosen her as our focus student, she was very motivated, which is very typical in research, isn't it? And she was worked very hard at improving her essay as she went through the peer review process. So when a student starts a work in Creator, they get a notification, they accept it, it takes them into Creator, and immediately they go to About This Work. You can see, because this was 3 years ago, that Ellie's work was approved for publication, but she can go in and look at what the timeline is, so when the draft was due, when feedback was due. She can look at what the task is Shakespeare the comedy of errors more a tragedy than a comedy? Present your argument by tracking at least 2 themes in the play and analysing Shakespeare's use of language. Embed at least 2 examples of multimedia that complements the written text. She can have dialogue with the teacher here. If we look at what Ellie did, and this really shows how motivated she was, she had 13 versions of her work. Typically, students will have 4, but she was really trying to use the feedback to improve her work. So we're going to look at her work at different stages of the feedback and see how this rubric-based assessment enabled her to develop her understanding and improve the outcome in her essay. So when we look at the feedback, and you will see that the rubric sits alongside the work that the student is writing. For this work, the teacher had 3 criteria. 1 was on structure, 1 was on analysis of theme, and 1 was on analysis of language. If we look at the structure, and I'll read this, I won't read them all, but I will read just 1 to give you an idea of how these rubrics are prospective, not retrospective, how they promote constructive feedback, not judgmental feedback. So here is what the teacher asked. Does the writer introduce precise claims, thesis statement, and distinguish them from alternate or opposing claims? Does the writer create an organisation that clearly addresses theme, language, and counterclaims? Does the writer use the analysis of theme and language as reasons and evidence to support his or her claim? Does the writer acknowledge counterclaims? Does the writer use a formal writing style? Reviewers suggest what claims and counterclaims could be added or omitted in the opening paragraph and how the organisation might be improved. Suggest areas that require more evidence and explanation. Please point out any informal language. So you can see here this focus on the reviewer providing prospective feedback, feedback that the author can take on to review her work. If we now look at how a student would give feedback, they can open the rubric and have a look. They can see what a 0 is. There is no introduction. 1, the writer introduces a claim. Number 2, the writer distinguishes claims from counterclaims. And 3, the argument is introduced clearly and precisely, etc. The student makes a decision. Is it a 0, 1, 2, 3, drags the bar across, and then writes a comment. So, and this happens for each of the criteria. So let's have a look now at the results that Ellie got. This was after version 7. So I'm the teacher looking in. Normally the feedback is anonymous and the students like that. They feel the feedback is more honest. But here, as a teacher, I can look in and I can see that Mikhail gave feedback, as did Josh. And it doesn't matter which one I look at, the feedback is quite amazing. Extended feedback. Okay, so here on the structure, your essay is good overall, but needs some improvement. Your hook and introduction are missing. You jump right into the theme and don't set up your paper, etc. Won't read through that in detail because I'm going to show you the very specific feedback that Eleanor got, and how that impacted on the different versions of her essay. But what you can see here is the feedback is recursive. So here is some feedback. Eleanor makes a response, and then Mikhail comes back and gives her another comment. And similarly for the theme, Eleanor can make a comment and Mikhail can come back. And then there's overall feedback about the feedback that she received. So again, we have a conversation. If I look at Josh's review, you'll see that it's very similar, quite extended feedback. And Eleanor could come back and make a comment back to Josh. Okay, so another form of feedback that the student got here was the annotations. All right, so I'm just going to flick back into my PowerPoint here, and I'm going to show you a little of how this feedback, which was crowdsourced in that was received by peers, was personalised for Eleanor. Without reading this is just her opening, just seeing from version 5 to her version 13 how much those 2 paragraphs changed. Without even reading it, you just have to look at how much more she's written. You know she's thought about it, and that she has really revised her work. But let's look very specifically at some of the feedback. I'm not sure how big this will be and whether you can see it, but I'll just go through it a little and try and just capture some of the points. All right, so after version 7, Eleanor received some feedback, and the feedback said, add some information to introduce the play and hook the reader. So in version 7, she didn't introduce the play at all, but in version 12, after this feedback from both her reviewers, here is her introduction, and she gives a little bit of an overview of the comedy of errors before going into what her argument is. She's hooking the reader just by giving this short overview of what the play is about. Another bit of feedback that she got was really just technical stuff. Set out your quotes correctly and use Roman numerals. So in version 7, she just wrote it in as prose, and she didn't have, I think she may have had some numbers in there, but not Roman numerals. So in version 12, Now she sets out this same quote about man more divine, the masters of all these, and she has included her Roman numerals. That's a bit of easy feedback to work on. Similarly, she got some feedback that some of her transitions from paragraph to paragraph were a bit rough. She uses also, and so one of her reviewers said, also is good in the middle of a paragraph, but probably not a good transition word at the beginning of a paragraph. And so she changes this paragraph that starts with also. She actually doesn't use any transition, but you can see just by using another, there's her transition word. A quote that shows another piece of evidence is when, and so it goes on. One of the most significant pieces of feedback that she got was do more in-depth analysis of language, have a dedicated paragraph on language. So in version 7, Eleanor only did language analysis in the context of explaining theme. And so she didn't really get to very deep language analysis. She was really just talking about the meaning of certain words in quotes. She then adds this very extensive paragraph after her feedback, and you can really see that she is focusing very much on word choice and what they've been learning about in terms of denotation and connotation. So she says word choice is very clearly chosen throughout this quote. Some such examples are, and then it goes on. She talks about the difference between connotation and denotation of some of the words. And so she is really thinking much more deeply about language analysis based on the feedback that she got from her peers. The last bit of feedback she got was make stronger connections between themes and tragedy. So instead of just discussing the themes, what's your thesis statement? So she only discusses tragedy in terms of the play's ending. When she reworks her essay, there are 3 or 4 times where there are sentences such as this. Because of this, the play is tragic, because it shows how darker themes such as sexism are present in the comedy of errors. Because of rash decisions and the way females are treated, this play is a tragedy. So she's just connecting what her main thesis statement is to every paragraph in her essay. So this very personalised feedback is helping her to revise her essay. It also develops her thinking and deepens her understanding of the work she's doing. And so I've copied in the comments she made in her self-review, which really shows how she is mastering analytic skills, drawing inferences, and reasoning. And I'm going to read this because it is so powerful. I tried to differentiate the analysis from the central ideas and separate ideas in each paragraph. In addition to this, I learned that I did not express the organisation of the essay in my introduction, so I made the entire piece confusing to the reader. I believe that I did cover most of the analysis of language in later versions of my essay, but it took a lot of help to do this. In the most current version, I've tried to separate and make each section clear to what I'm analysing. For each of the different quotes, I tried to analyse either emphasis or word choice. I tried to add the connotation and denotation in the second version, but I did not express my ideas with clarity. Although I tried to fix all of these things, I did not understand that I needed to do that until after reading the reviews from my teachers and peers. So those reviews from her teachers and peers really encouraged her to work on this essay before she finally submitted it in version 12 or 13 for publication. You can see the metacognition that is going on here, and how much that feedback is prospective and constructive, which links back to Bill's presentation where he talks about feedback really supporting the learner and it being recursive and formative as well. So from here, I'm going to just jump back into Scholar. Just bear with me as I go back over to there, and I'm going to look at the third part of my presentation, which is about big data, learning analytics, and artificial intelligence as feedback. So here are the learning analytics. This is the class studying the comedy of errors. This is at the end of the unit. The unit only went for 3 weeks. It was at the end of the school year, and many students couldn't complete their work in time, so not all sections of this ASTA plot are completed. At the end, our score was 62. Theta, the highest number can be theta 100. Our class had 62. You can see in this ASTA plot that there are 3 areas. There is knowledge, there is focus, which is effort, and there is help, which is how much students are collaborating and supporting each other. This visualisation is amazing, really. Look at this. It's based on 1,172 metric values derived from 147,790 total data points collected across all members of this community. Teachers cannot possibly do this level of fine analysis of what's going on in student learning. Nor do teachers focus on all of these areas. It's very difficult to assess collaboration. How can we look at how students are helping each other? How are they contributing to the collaborative intelligence of the group? And the ASTA plot is one way of showing that through help. You'll see these colours align. So this blue is engagement with member updates. This is annotation effort. This one here, text quality project works, and so it goes on. If I click on it, this is the average number of annotations per works. All right, so we didn't do too badly on that as a class. You can see most of the ASTA plot is full, and I can click on this for more information. This one here is the number of comments posted. All right, so these are posts on students' updates, not posts on the teacher's update, but comments on what students post in an update. So this is really pushing to go beyond responding to the teacher, but responding to each other. If I click on that for more information, I think you can see here, this can tell students we needed to have 14 comments posted per member. On average, there was 2.39, and that's why the score was quite low. Okay, let's go back in here. Sorry, I'll just get rid of that. Okay. And we can click on any of these, and students do, and I'll show you a student's view of it in a moment, to see how they're going and what they can improve on. All right, so here's the number of reviews they've completed. They're the peer reviews. So 54%. We asked students to do 4 peer reviews. Most only had time to do 2, and so that's shown in the ASTA plot with 50% completed. This one's the average number of views. So if I was a student, how many people have looked at my updates? Okay. Here are the number of multimodal elements. This one here is how much they revised their work before submitting it for publication. This one here is the length of the work. And I can click on all of these for more information, and the students do click on them to find out how they're going. So focus is their effort, the average word length of their works. And students, we had a very low word length. We thought, oh, they're going to be pushed for time. We'll just get them to write 400 words. And, you know, the work you just looked at was 2,500 words. We only asked them to do 1 project, and every student at least started their project. Average number of words per update authored. So when they've created updates like the one you saw with the pictures of the themes, how many words did they write? And here, the number of updates. We asked them to do 2. Most students only had time to do 1. And here's the number of comments they made on instructor updates. So that's their effort against what the teacher asked them to do. Down here it was for responding to students. Over here in the knowledge, okay, this one is based on teacher reviews. We didn't do many teacher reviews, just a couple. We depended on peer review because we wanted to see how peer review worked in this group as a form of feedback. Here is self-review. Only less than half of the students did self-reviews. Here, this was the peer-reviewed score. In my opinion, this one here is one of the most important parts of the learning analytics because this is the score they're getting based on the rubric. This is the personalised feedback that they are getting based on their work that they are doing. So this tells them what is the quality of their work based on their peers' review of their work. The structured rubric guides the students, which validates this score in many ways. So the students are very clear about what they're giving feedback on. This one here is the text quality, which is really as much as computers can look at sentence structure and vocabulary to work out text quality. So let's have a look at what a student would see. I'm going to go into this community and I'm going to look at my students. Here you can see some are green and some are red. Red flags a problem. And Kira, who is a great student, was involved in the national history competition, so kind of dropped out even though she'd done some work early on, couldn't continue because of having to go to Washington for the history competition. But Eleanor, who was our focus student, and we chose her because we knew she wasn't going off to Washington. And if I just click on this, I should be able to see her Astor plot. So this is what Eleanor would see. This is her Astor plot, okay? And she got a teacher review, okay? She's done really well. And look at when she clicks on this is the self-review. She didn't give herself 100%, but she got 2 out of 3 on most of them. Here, this was the overall judgment of the intellectual quality of her work, and here is the text quality. When I go over here, this area here, she didn't make as many she only created 1 of the 2 updates that she was meant to do. Again, time was the factor there. Eleanor was very interesting because she said, I wanted 100. I wanted to work harder, but the term ended and that was it in terms of finishing the project. Here is what she can see about how she's collaborated with others. She got lots of annotations on her work. Here was the number of comments she posted on other students' updates, and that's where she could have done more work. Here is the number of reviews she authored. She wrote 4 reviews. She requested to do more reviews, and so on. So all of this feedback is personalised, but it's also adaptive. So every day students would log in and see how they were doing in their analytics, and they would then work hard to see if by the next day that score could be improved. It's as you go. Linking back to Bill's presentation, yes, it's adaptive. Yes, it's the individual, but it's the individual working collaboratively, and it's where every learner can succeed. They're getting the feedback here that is going to help them to self-regulate their learning and to improve their learning outcomes. So the last part of my presentation, I'm going to leave Scholar now and head over back to my PowerPoint where I'm going to talk about mastery learning. But before I do, I'll just put that up and just give you a minute to read through, because this really shows what students beyond our focus student, Eleanor, said about working with the learning analytics and how it helped them to self-regulate their learning. Let's move on. Now, in Bill's presentation, he showed you a bell curve. This is a different one based on Bloom's work. So most of you know Bloom because of Bloom's taxonomy, and just a wonderful tool that many teachers use to try and increase the intellectual quality of the work that they're doing. But Bloom is also famous for developing the concept of mastery learning. Bloom argued that if you have uniform instruction, you will get the bell curve in terms of aptitude and achievement. But he said, if you want to change that, you have to introduce something called optimal instruction. So no matter if you have the bell curve in terms of aptitude, you're going to move that achievement curve so that we have better outcomes for learners. And he said that there were 3 aspects of mastery learning. 1, peer collaboration. 2, formative feedback. And 3, optimal instruction through correctives. Now, as he was working through this in the 1970s and the 1980s, a lot of people were interested in it and tried it out. But what they found was to do this optimal instruction and set up peer collaboration was a lot of work for teachers. And so many teachers, even though they loved mastery learning, just found the workload too enormous to manage. So in the early 2000s, people were still researching and looking at mastery learning, but things started to change with the introduction of more technology. And it's technology that is really the enabler here that can make mastery learning happen without having teachers fall over because of overwork. All right. So peer collaboration, that can happen through a discussion forum, and it can happen through peer review and feedback. Formative feedback can happen as students revise their work in different versions until they submit their work for publication after having feedback that is crowdsourced. Then there is optimal instruction through correctives. These correctives could be tutorials, one-to-one, small group work, but now technology can make it happen through personalised feedback with a structured rubric and adaptive feedback through learning analytics. And this is what is really the difference in how digital technologies can enable mastery learning. Jessica Haroon, the teacher at Wisconsin, and I have written about this in a paper. If you're interested, just email me and I'll happily send you that paper. But I'll end here and wish you well for the rest of the conference.